The dust was still settling when the shot cracked through the air. Private First Class Elena Ramirez dropped flat into the dirt, heart hammering, ears ringing from the snap of a rifle round cutting just inches above her helmet. She knew that sound too well. A sniper. Close enough to smell the powder if she lifted her head. Her squad was spread thin along the dried riverbed, no cover but scattered rocks and thornbrush. She cursed under her breath, pressing her cheek to the hot Afghan soil. "Ramirez, you good?" Staff Sergeant Collins's voice carried through the radio, tight but steady. "I'm pinned," she whispered, breath quick, her hand clutching the M4 carbine tight to her chest. "Snipers got me zeroed." Another shot cracked. This one smacked into the rock inches from her elbow, spraying her with stone fragments. Her pulse spiked. She fought to keep her breathing steady the way they taught her in training, but training didn't mention how your hands would shake when death was lining you up like a ranged target. Collins barked orders through the net. Henderson, smoke out the east ridge. Torres, suppressing fire left flank. Ramirez, stay put. Don't you move until I say. The squad erupted into noise, the thud of a 203 grenade launcher, the staccato bursts of M4s, the echo bouncing off barren hills. Elena pressed her helmet tighter against her head, willing herself to melt into the ground. She was days from discharge, hours from leaving this cursed valley behind, and now she was staring down the glass eye of some insurgent with a bead on her. Her mind betrayed her. She thought of her mother back in El Paso who begged her not to enlist. She thought of her brother's goofy grin when he told her she looked like G.I. Jane with an attitude. She thought of how she promised herself she'd make it home in one piece. Now, every second the sniper let her live felt like mercy she didn't deserve. "Ramirez," Collins's voice crackled in her ear again, lower now. "You hearing me?" "Copy," she whispered, her lips so dry they cracked. "Listen to me. That bastard is hunting you. I need you to think. What do you see?" She forced her eyes open, scanning through the grit and glare. The ridge loomed maybe 300 meters out, jagged like broken teeth. Heat waves shimmered, distorting everything. She squinted, tracing shadows, watching for the flicker of movement. Then, there. The tiniest glint, like sunlight flashing off glass. Her gut twisted. 3 o'clock mid-ridge, she murmured. "Good eyes. Keep him busy. Don't fire unless you're sure." "Roger." Her fingers slid onto the trigger. She adjusted her aim, steadying her breath. Her body screamed to run, but she stayed, patient, eyes locked on that glint. A bead of sweat trickled down her nose. The world shrank to a tunnel, her rifle sights, the rock, the shimmer of glass. The sniper fired again. Dirt erupted by her knee. Her ears rang. She didn't flinch this time. She squeezed off a controlled burst, 3 rounds punching at the shadowed spot. A beat of silence. Then Collins yelled, "Shift right, Ramirez. Move." She rolled hard, scraping her arms raw on the rocks, and crawled behind a boulder. Another crack of the sniper rifle echoed, but the bullet smacked harmlessly into the dirt where she'd been. She pressed her back to the stone, lungs heaving, adrenaline flooding her limbs. "Good work," Collins said. "You bought us a window. Squad's moving up the ridge. Stay sharp." She peeked out. Henderson was already bounding up, smoke grenades spewing thick plumes that curled in the hot wind. Torres laid down cover fire, bullets stitching the rocks. The rest of the squad advanced in leaps and bounds. They were going to flank him. But Elena knew something. Snipers didn't travel alone. If there was one, there could be spotters or worse, another rifle waiting. Her instinct screamed danger. She keyed the radio. "Sergeant, I don't like this. He's baiting us." "Noted," Collins said, voice clipped. "But we can't sit here. We move or he keeps us pinned till dark." The squad surged forward. Elena's legs trembled as she prepared to join them, but she gritted her teeth and pushed off the ground. Each step felt like it might be her last. Halfway up the ridge, chaos erupted. Gunfire burst from the opposite slope, AK-47s chattering like jackhammers. Tracers ripped through the smoke. The squad dove for cover, shouting over the radio. "Contact left. Contact left." Elena hit the dirt again, her helmet clanging against a rock. Her ears filled with the roar of automatic fire. They'd walked right into a crossfire. Collins swore. "All squads, break contact. Fall back. Ramirez, smoke out R6. Her hands moved before her brain did. She yanked a smoke grenade, popped the pin, and hurled it behind them. A cloud billowed, masking their retreat. Bullets snapped through the haze, but the cover was just enough. One by one, the soldiers scrambled back down the ridge, dragging a wounded man whose leg dangled limp. Elena covered their retreat, firing short bursts into the ridgeline, trying to suppress unseen shooters. Her magazines dwindled fast. Sweat stung her eyes. Her heart thundered so hard she thought it might burst. Finally, Collins's voice cut through. "Ramirez, fall back now." She sprinted, legs burning, lungs on fire. The squad regrouped behind the dried riverbed, huddled in the meager cover. Henderson knelt over the wounded man, pressing bandages to the bleeding leg. The man, Private Diaz, screamed through clenched teeth. Blood soaked into the dust. Elena collapsed beside them, chest heaving, hands shaking so bad she dropped her last magazine. She forced herself to focus, to reload, to breathe. Collins crouched low, helmet tilted, eyes scanning the smoke-smeared ridge. His face was carved with lines of grit and fury. "That sniper set us up," he muttered. "He knew we'd push the ridge. That wasn't random fire. That was coordinated." No one argued. The squad sat in grim silence, the wounded soldiers' groans filling the air. Elena stared at her blood-streaked hands, bile rising in her throat. She was alive. Barely. But the question clawed at her chest. For how long? She swallowed hard, wiped the blood on her pants and checked her rifle. She didn't let herself think about the fact that, if she hadn't rolled when Collins shouted, her body would be lying in that dust instead of Diaz's blood. She didn't let herself think about how close she'd come to never seeing home again. Because out here, in this godforsaken valley, thinking too much was just another way to die. That was only the first clash of the day. Hours later, they would face decisions that tested not just their skills but their souls. Elena knew now that survival wasn't about luck, it was about choices. And every choice carried a price. And somewhere up on that ridge, the sniper was still waiting. The night smelled of cordite and dust. Ramirez sat against the wall of a crumbling mud compound, helmet tilted back, hands black with grime. Her rifle rested across her lap, barrel still warm from the last firefight. The stars overhead were bright and sharp, too clean for a valley soaked in blood. She tilted her head back, trying to breathe past the metallic tang in her mouth. She was supposed to be leaving in 3 days. 3 days until discharge, 3 days until freedom. But now her hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Hey." Torres dropped down beside her, tossing an MRE packet. "Collins'll skin you alive if you pass out from low blood sugar." "I'm fine," Ramirez muttered, though she tore the pack open anyway. Chicken chunks and rice. It tasted like cardboard soaked in salt, but the motion of chewing grounded her. Torres gave her a sideways look. "You pulled your weight today." She snorted. "Almost got my head blown off." "Yeah, well, welcome to Afghanistan." Torres leaned back against the wall, eyes scanning the shadows. "Don't beat yourself up. That sniper was good. Real good. Bastard was playing chess while we were playing checkers." Ramirez chewed slowly, her stomach turning with every swallow. "Diaz almost died because of me." Torres shook his head. "Because of him, not you. Don't start carrying ghosts that ain't yours." But she already was. Collins called a briefing inside the compound, a single lantern throwing hard shadows against the walls. The squad gathered, weary faces streaked with dirt and sweat. Henderson was still tending Diaz, who lay pale but stable after a rough field dressing. Collins stood with arms crossed, his voice clipped. Today was a wake-up call. That sniper wasn't freelancing. He drew us into a kill zone. Someone out there knew our route, knew our timing, knew enough to set an ambush. Murmurs rippled through the group. "You saying we got a leak?" Torres asked. "I'm saying it's possible," Collins said. "Intel said this valley was quiet. Clearly Intel was wrong. That means we adapt. Tomorrow we push north, link up with Alpha Company at the outpost near the ridge. We take Diaz with us, stretcher carry. We don't split. We don't linger. We move as one." Ramirez's gut clenched. That meant dragging Diaz straight through sniper territory. She wanted to speak up, to shout that it was suicide, but Collins's expression shut down any protest. His jaw was set like granite. Instead, she swallowed her fear and asked, "What about the sniper?" Collins's eyes flicked to her. "We'll deal with him when we have to. Until then, he's just one more son of a bitch trying to keep us from doing our job." The meeting broke. Soldiers drifted back to their corners of the compound, checking gear, cleaning rifles. Ramirez stayed seated long after, staring at the map spread across Collins's table. The red line marked their route, a scar running through enemy territory. Every inch of it could hide a rifle barrel aimed at her skull. She whispered to herself, 3 more days. Just 3. Dawn came harsh and gray. The squad moved out in staggered formation, Diaz lashed to a stretcher carried by Henderson and Torres. The valley was silent except for boots crunching gravel and the occasional clink of gear. Even the birds seemed to be holding their breath. Ramirez kept her rifle raised, eyes sweeping the ridgelines. Every shadow looked like death. Every glint of stone looked like glass reflecting off a scope. They made it a mile before Collins signaled a halt. He crouched, scanning the horizon. "Something's off," he muttered. Ramirez's pulse quickened. "You see him?" "No. That's the problem." Then it happened. A single shot, sharp and clean, echoed through the valley. One of the rear men cried out and dropped, clutching his shoulder. The squad scattered, diving behind boulders. "Contact. Sniper." Ramirez's blood turned to ice. She pressed her back to a rock, peering upward. The ridge was silent, empty, endless. Somewhere up there, the sniper was adjusting his sights, lining up the next shot. "Smoke. Now." Collins barked. Plumes of white and red smoke blossomed across the trail, curling into the air. The squad huddled low, dragging the wounded soldier and Diaz into cover. "Ramirez." Collins snapped. "Eyes on that ridge. Talk to me." She steadied her breathing, scanning the slopes. Her hands trembled, but she forced herself still. Then she saw it, the faintest ripple like cloth shifting against rock. Her heart stuttered. 2 o'clock, 300 meters, she shouted. Collins relayed orders, directing fire toward the spot. Bullets chewed into the ridge, dust exploding in clouds. For a heartbeat, silence. Then the sniper fired again, and Henderson nearly dropped Diaz's stretcher as a round ricocheted off the rock beside him. "They're trying to take out the stretcher team," Torres yelled. Panic threatened to swallow Ramirez. She remembered the first shot, inches from her head. The way the world had tunneled to nothing but a sight picture and a trigger pull. She remembered Collins's voice steadying her. This time no one steadied her. She braced her rifle on the rock, sighted in and squeezed. 3 rounds cracked, kicking dust off the ridge. She thought she saw a shadow jerk back. Collins shouted, "That's it. Move." The squad surged forward through the smoke, half carrying Diaz, half dragging the other wounded man. Ramirez covered their retreat, firing controlled bursts at the ridge. Her magazine ran dry. She slammed another in, hands clumsy but fast. They pushed hard, lungs burning, feet pounding gravel. The smoke cover began to thin. Still no return fire. Maybe she hit him. Maybe he was just shifting position. She didn't know. She didn't care. She just ran. By the time they stumbled into a ravine 2 miles up, the squad was spent. They collapsed behind the rocks, gasping for air, hands slick with sweat and blood. Henderson checked the wounded again, muttering curses under his breath. Collins crouched beside Ramirez, his face unreadable. "You think you tagged him?" Her throat was too dry to answer. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to believe the shadow that jerked back was real. But deep down she knew better. Snipers like that didn't go down easy. The ravine offered temporary safety but not peace. Hours crawled by. Heat pressed down like a weight. Flies swarmed the bandages on Diaz's leg. The men grew restless, muttering in low tones. Ramirez sat apart, cleaning her rifle with methodical precision. She tried to drown out the whispers, the memories, the pounding in her skull. But her mind replayed the firefight on a loop. The sniper's patience. The precision. The way he seemed to be everywhere at once. She couldn't shake the feeling he was toying with them. Torres broke the silence. "You ever think about what you'll do after? Once you're out?" Ramirez looked up. His expression was casual, but his eyes were tired. "Don't know," she admitted. "Haven't thought that far." "Bullshit. Everyone thinks about it." She hesitated, then shrugged. "Maybe go back to school. Maybe just breathe. Sleep without boots on." Torres chuckled softly. "Sounds nice. Me, I'll open a taco truck. Park it outside the base back home. Make a killing feeding guys too lazy to cook." She smiled despite herself. "You can't cook." "Yeah, well, I'll learn." The brief laughter faded, leaving behind the heavy silence again. But for a moment it felt human. It felt real. Night fell. They moved again, slower this time, carrying Diaz and the wounded man by rotation. The darkness cloaked them, but it also sharpened every sound. Boots on gravel, fabric scraping stone, the faint hiss of wind through the valley. Ramirez's nerves stretched taut. Every shadow was a threat. Every ridge a barrel waiting to spit fire. Halfway through the march, Collins raised a fist. The squad froze. Ahead, the faint glow of a campfire flickered against the rocks. Voices drifted on the wind, low, guttural, speaking a language Ramirez couldn't understand but recognized instantly. Taliban. The squad crouched low, rifles raised. Collins whispered orders, his tone sharp and quiet. We flank wide. Stay low, stay quiet. We don't engage unless we're burned. Got it? They moved like ghosts, slipping along the ravine edge. Ramirez's heart pounded in her throat. She could see them now, 3 men by the fire, rifles slung casually. One of them laughed, tossing something into the flames. For a moment she thought they might pass unseen. Then a rock shifted under Henderson's boot. The sound was soft, but in the stillness it was thunder. One of the men by the fire snapped his head up. His hand went for his rifle. Collins cursed. Engage. Gunfire erupted, sharp and brutal. The men by the fire went down quick, but not before one loosed a burst that shattered stone inches from Ramirez's head. Sparks lit the darkness. The valley roared with echoes. And somewhere above the chaos, a single rifle cracked. Ramirez dove, instinct screaming, as a bullet hissed past her ear and buried itself in Torres's chest. He fell back, eyes wide, mouth opening in shock. Blood spread across his vest like wildfire. No! Ramirez screamed, scrambling to his side. She pressed her hands to the wound, but the blood pumped hot and fast, soaking her fingers. Torres coughed, choking, his lips turning red. Collins dragged her back. Ramirez, cover fire. Now! She fought against him, hands slippery with Torres's blood. He's hit. I can't. Do your job, soldier. Collins's voice was steel. The sniper fired again. Stone chips sliced Ramirez's cheek. Rage and fear collided inside her, boiling over. She snatched up her rifle, tears blurring her vision, and unleashed a storm of fire into the ridgeline. The echoes rolled for miles. The sniper did not answer. When the gunfire finally died, Torres was gone. Ramirez sat in the dirt, hands still pressed to his chest, his blood cold now. Her body shook, her throat raw from screaming. Around her, the squad moved in silence, faces hard, eyes avoiding hers. They packed quickly, dragging Diaz and the other wounded, preparing to move before the sniper returned. Collins knelt by her, voice low. We can't stay. I'm sorry. She looked up at him, eyes blazing. I should have. You did what you could. No, she whispered, voice breaking. I should have taken the shot earlier. I hesitated. Collins gripped her shoulder hard. Listen to me. That sniper wants you second-guessing. Wants you blaming yourself. Don't give him that. But she already had. As the squad slipped back into the night, Torres's body left behind in the dust, Ramirez felt something shift inside her. Fear hardened into anger. Guilt sharpened into resolve. The sniper wasn't just an enemy anymore. He was personal. And she swore, under her breath, that before her discharge, before she left this valley behind, she'd find him. And end him. The morning after Torres's death was colder than the desert had any right to be. Ramirez sat with her back against a rock, clutching her rifle to her chest like it was the only thing holding her together. The sky was pale gray, the kind that made the horizon blur into nothing. Around her, the squad was silent, moving mechanically as they packed their gear. No one said Torres's name. That silence was worse than the gunfire. Collins gathered them before moving out. His face was stone, but his eyes carried the same grief they all felt. We've lost good men. We still got 2 wounded. And we're being hunted by a sniper who knows this terrain better than we do. But listen to me, his voice rose, cutting through the morning air. We are not broken. We will not be picked apart. We push to the outpost, we link up with Alpha, and we get our brothers the hell out of this valley alive. Understood. A weak chorus of Roger followed. Ramirez didn't answer. Her throat was tight, her hands still stained with dried blood. Torres's laugh still echoed in her ears. She could almost smell the smoke of that little campfire, the moment before everything went to hell. She swore to herself again, I'll find him. I'll end him. The march north was brutal. They moved in staggered columns through dry wadis and jagged ridgelines, every man scanning for the faintest glint of glass. Every 20 minutes Collins ordered a halt, forcing them to catch their breath and recheck sectors. The wounded slowed them. Henderson and Ramirez rotated on Diaz's stretcher, sweat pouring down their faces as they trudged through loose gravel. Diaz groaned in half-conscious pain, his face waxy and pale. The other wounded man, Johnson, limped along with his arm in a makeshift sling, teeth clenched against every step. The valley seemed endless. The silence oppressive. Then hours in, the silence broke. Crack. A bullet smashed into the dirt inches from Johnson's boot. He stumbled with a curse, nearly going down. Sniper, someone yelled. Chaos erupted. The squad dove for cover, dragging Diaz into a ditch. Ramirez's chest seized with panic. Her eyes swept the ridges. Nothing. Just rocks, shadows, and the endless shimmer of heat. Collins barked, suppressing fire. 3 o'clock ridge. Rifles thundered, spitting dust and flame. Ramirez added her own bursts, teeth clenched, eyes straining for any sign of movement. But the ridge stayed lifeless. Then another crack, this one from behind. A round snapped past Collins's head, close enough to cut his cheek with a hot line of blood. 2 shooters. Henderson yelled. Ramirez's stomach dropped. Not just one. They were being played by a team. Collins roared, "Smoke out." Into the rocks now. They scattered, dragging the wounded, hurling smoke grenades until the valley swirled with white clouds. Bullets hissed through, but the sniper team didn't press. Just one shot at a time, measured, patient. Hurting them like cattle. Ramirez's lungs burned as she sprinted, Diaz's stretcher jarring in her grip. Sweat blurred her vision. The world was nothing but gunfire and smoke and the weight of a dying man. Finally, Collins signaled halt. They collapsed into a narrow ravine, panting, hearts pounding. Ramirez's hands trembled as she reloaded. Her eyes darted to Collins. 2 of them, she said, voice raw. He nodded grimly. At least 2. Maybe more. The squad exchanged uneasy glances. A single sniper was bad enough. A team meant coordination, angles, traps. It meant they weren't just being hunted, they were being studied. That night they made camp in silence. No fire. No lights. Just darkness and the sound of boots shifting on gravel. Ramirez lay awake, staring at the stars. Torres's face haunted her every time she closed her eyes. She wanted to sleep, but every crack of stone, every whisper of wind made her heart leap. She thought of home. Of her mother's kitchen, warm and loud. Of her brother teasing her about her haircut. She thought of how she'd promised them she'd make it back. And then she thought of Torres, his blood hot on her hands, his laugh cut short by a bullet she never saw. Her fists clenched. She whispered into the dark, "You don't get to win. Not while I'm breathing." The next morning, Collins pulled Ramirez aside. "You're rattled?" he said flatly. She met his eyes, jaw tight. "I'm fine." "Bullshit. I saw you freeze last night. You're carrying Torres like a rucksack. You can't afford that, not out here." Her throat burned. "He was my friend." "He was mine too," Collins said softly. Then his voice hardened. "But you want to honor him? Then you stay sharp. You do your job. You keep the rest of us alive." Ramirez swallowed hard. "What if I can't?" "You can." Collins's gaze was iron. "Because you have to." Something in his certainty steadied her, just enough to breathe again. By midday they were moving through a narrow canyon, walls towering above them. Ramirez's nerves screamed. Canyons were death traps. No cover. No exit. Perfect sniper country. She kept her rifle raised, scanning the cliffs. Sweat trickled into her eyes. Every step was a countdown. Then the ambush came. Not from rifles this time, but from voices. Shouts echoed ahead in the harsh cadence of Pashto. Figures appeared on the cliffs, Taliban fighters, rifles raised. Not snipers this time, but a full squad. AKs opened fire, rattling like chainsaws. Bullets sparked off stone, showering the canyon in dust. "Contact front." Collins bellowed. The squad dove for what little cover they could find, small outcroppings, cracks in the canyon walls. Ramirez hit the dirt, returning fire in short, controlled bursts. Her rounds sparked against the cliffs, forcing the enemy to duck. But it wasn't enough. The Taliban had height and numbers. And worst of all, Ramirez knew, this was coordinated. The snipers had driven them here. Driven them straight into a kill zone. Her mind raced. They couldn't stay pinned. They'd be slaughtered. Then she spotted it, a narrow chute off to the right, half hidden by rubble. A potential escape. "Sergeant!" she shouted over the gunfire. "Side path 2 o'clock. Collins followed her aim, eyes narrowing. "Henderson. Johnson. Lay suppressing fire. Ramirez, you're on point. Move." Adrenaline surged. Ramirez leapt from cover, sprinting toward the chute as bullets tore into the ground around her. She fired on the run, keeping the enemy's heads down, heart hammering. She reached the chute and dropped to her knee, laying down covering fire while the squad hustled the wounded through. Henderson carried Diaz like a sack of grain, teeth bared with effort. Johnson stumbled but kept moving. Collins brought up the rear, firing bursts from his M4. "Go, go, go!" Ramirez yelled, her voice raw. They scrambled through the chute, the canyon walls narrowing until they were almost scraping shoulders. The gunfire behind them faded, but not the danger. Not with those snipers still out there. Finally they spilled into open ground, a plateau overlooking the valley. The squad collapsed in exhaustion, gasping for breath. But Ramirez didn't collapse. She dropped to her stomach, rifle raised, eyes scanning the ridges. And there, faint, almost invisible, she caught it. A flicker of movement. A man shifting just slightly, hidden in the rocks. Her chest tightened. The sniper. She steadied her breathing, finger curling on the trigger. For one heartbeat the world went still. Then Collins's voice cut through. "Ramirez, don't take it." Her finger froze. "I've got him?" "No. It's a trap. You fire, you give him your position." Her teeth clenched. Every instinct screamed to pull the trigger, to avenge Torres, to end this nightmare. But Collins's voice was command, sharp and unyielding. She lowered her rifle, shaking with rage. The flicker vanished. The sniper melted back into the rocks like smoke. And Ramirez felt the sting of failure sharper than any bullet. That night she barely touched her rations. She sat alone on the plateau edge, staring into the endless dark. Henderson approached quietly, dropping beside her. "You had him, didn't you?" She didn't answer. Henderson sighed. "Collins was right, you know. If you'd fired, he'd have had you dead to rights." Her jaw tightened. "Maybe. Maybe not. You're good, Ramirez. But he's better. Right now, anyway." Henderson's tone softened. "Doesn't mean you won't get your chance." She looked at him, eyes burning. "And what if I don't? What if he keeps picking us off, one by one?" Henderson didn't flinch. "Then we make sure we're not easy targets. That's all any of us can do." His calm steadied her a little. But the fire inside her didn't fade. She whispered, almost to herself, "Next time he's mine." By dawn the squad was moving again. The outpost was still miles away, the snipers still somewhere above them, unseen but ever present. Ramirez marched in silence, rifle tight in her hands, eyes scanning every ridge. Every step forward felt heavier, weighed down by guilt, rage and determination. She didn't know if she'd make it to Discharge. She didn't know if she'd even survive the next ridge. But she knew this. Before she left this valley, before she set foot on American soil again, she'd look that sniper in the eye. And she'd make him bleed. Dawn broke gray and flat, the kind of light that made the world look like a photograph someone had already slipped into their pocket. Ramirez felt the chill in her bones even before she left the makeshift sleeping area. The plateau's wind had a way of stealing the small things, heat, courage, the tiny comforts that made a man human. She shrugged on her jacket, checked her rifle and moved with the squad, every step measured and cautious. They reached the outpost by late morning. Alpha Company was already there, a clumsy knot of sandbags, radio masts and beaten plywood with soldiers moving like a different species. Less tired, better fed, and tempered by the kind of routine that comes from rotating onto a position and staying. The outpost commander, Captain Myers, a stocky man with a tobacco-stained voice and a permanent 5 o'clock shadow, met Collins on the perimeter and barked rapid questions. Collins answered with the clipped, efficient cadence of someone who gives bad news on a loop. Ramirez dismounted the stretcher beside Diaz and watched Captain Myers' expression tighten as he looked over the wounded. "We'll get him patched up in our aid station." "Good work getting him in," Myers said, a curt nod that somehow carried more relief than praise. "I want debriefs, routes, anything you can give me. And we'll not be sending you back out alone. You'll get support." The relief in those words was a small, sharp thing in Ramirez's chest. Support. Reinforcements. Maybe someone else would draw fire and die instead of them. She wanted to believe it, wanted to let her shoulders drop and her breath even out. Inside the outpost's cramped aid station, Diaz was laid on a cot, his wounds scrubbed and packed, the medic cursing softly as he worked. The medic, a wiry specialist named Lyle with a tendency to creep into long monologues about football teams, grinned at Ramirez when he finished. "You hauled him good. You know, we should make a club. People who carry their own dead weight." He handed her a bandage. "Don't let Collins skin you for drying out blood on your kit. That's a hygiene violation." She managed a small, humorless smile. "I'll keep that in mind." Outside, Collins and Captain Myers conferred, maps spread across a barrel. Ramirez lingered within earshot, pretending to check her magazines. The words that floated to her were cold and procedural, but every syllable meant something real. "We're not going to chase shadows," Myers said. "You're under strength, tired, and you've got 2 casualties. We're going to reinforce your sector, sweep the valley with overwatch and run a few patrols to flush them out. No solo hunts. No wild moves. Collins' reply was a low rumble. We need to get our guys out of the valley, Captain. We can't keep taking piecemeal hits. We'll coordinate, Myers said. But you hold here. You rest. You brief me everything. I'll have UAV support on the East Ridge within the hour and a mortar team on standby. If we're lucky, we'll flush them by nightfall. The word UAV hit Ramirez like cold water. Drones meant eyes from the sky, metal birds circling, watching, frustrating the patience of a sniper who relied on the cover of blank horizons. If there was any hope of finding her ghost with a scope, it lay in a mechanical eye that couldn't be fooled by a single human's patience. Collins caught her watching and gave her a look that was equal parts command and invitation. You and Henderson go debrief with Myers. We'll run some maintenance. Keep your head on straight. The debrief was clinical, detailed. Maps, timelines, grids, the kind of disciplined memory recall that turned terror into technique. Ramirez rattled off positions, shots fired, times. Captain Myers scribbled notes, nodded, and asked sharp questions about angles and likely escape routes. Ramirez found herself clicking into a different gear, memory becoming ammunition. When she finished, Myers folded the map and regarded her with something like respect. You've got a good eye, he said. You saw things others missed. Keep that. And listen, if the UAV picks up a glint of optics on the ridge, we won't risk an entire squad on a blind savior. We'll set a trap. The trap. The word was a promise. It also sounded dangerously like bait. Ramirez didn't say anything, but her hands tightened on the strap of her rifle. The hours before the operation were a small, quiet war. Soldiers ran through checks like prayer rituals. Engines hummed. Radios chattered about wind speeds and feed altitudes. The UAV team arrived, 2 techs in high-visibility vests who treated the drone like a pampered animal. They set up a feed, a little rectangle of the valley on a laptop that looked more alive than the dusty land below. Ramirez watched the feed, the valley rendered in pixels and infrared like a living topographical map. The UAV glided high over the ridge, its camera sweeping hungrily for heat signatures. Ramirez imagined the sniper up there seeing a black disk in the sky and smiling, thinking only, the hunters come as prey. She wanted to clap her hands together and smash that smile. Myers briefed the plan in clipped sentences. We'll pin the East Ridge with mortar, creep in with Overwatch, then flush along the north route. You'll be on the trap element with Alpha. Ramirez, you'll be with us. Stay low. Watch offsets. If you spot a glint or movement, call it and do not engage unless cleared. Understood. Ramirez's jaw tightened. Understood. The march into place was smoother than the squad's previous movements. Reinforcements shifted like live pieces. Morale rose with the numbers. The mortar team set their tubes into place, the shell casings clinking like mechanical applause. The UAV wheeled above, its tiny camera an indifferent eye. At midday, the mortar fire began, booms that made the ground shiver and threw up plumes of dust along the ridgeline. It was a thudding, purposeful rhythm meant to shove any sleepers out of their positions. Overwatch teams opened fire in controlled bursts to keep heads down. And then the main element moved, a careful squeeze through a dry wash, soldiers in columns, every man's pulse synchronized to footfalls and radio ticks. Ramirez stayed tight to her element, eyes roaming the ridge as if possibility hung from each rock. She wanted to see him, the sniper who had become an obsession, and end it with one heartless pull of her finger. But she also kept her mouth shut, listened, watched. Colin's voice in her ear was a tether. Wait. They reached an overhang where Alpha's trap was set, a line of soldiers in covered positions, gillied and patient, and a kill lane leading to a gorge where mortar and rifle converged. Captain Myers had positioned the drone feed on a tablet toward the front, and for the first time that day Ramirez felt something like relief. The aerial view was granular, heat signatures flickering like moths. For 10 minutes, nothing. For 20, the soldiers breathed shallow. Then on the tablet, Ramirez saw it, a small, nearly imperceptible white dot moving along a rock's edge. The glint of a scope in sun. Her breath left her like air through a slipped seam. She swallowed, fingers clenching. The dot moved with intention, a measured creep. Got something, she whispered into the mic, barely audible. The tablet froze as the tech zoomed the feed. The white dot resolved into a human form. A man, crouched, with a long rifle and something like patience carved into his shoulders. He adjusted his stock and peered through the glass. The drone operator cursed and toggled the infrared, heat signature confirmed. Bingo, the operator breathed. The screen lit up with a hot yellow splotch in contrast to the cooler rocks. We'll mark grid. You've got him. Collins was a mountain of motion. Hold positions. Mortars, be ready. On my mark. His voice had that cold, controlled bite of a man who would take no chances. Ramirez's body hummed, every sense exercised. The plan went into a taut choreography. Mortars lifted and dropped with precisely timed intervals designed to force a movement, to rip the sniper's cushion of time into shreds. The sniper should have been dislodged by the barrage, forced to reposition. Instead he didn't move. He stayed, a statue of resolve, the glint of his scope catching the sun as if he thumbed a smile at the UAS above. Captain Myers cursed under his breath. If he's that patient, he's not alone. 2 teams, the drone tech said flatly. Another heat sig 20 meters north. The map on the tablet stuttered as the second blip appeared like a shadow. The plan twisted. Where there had been a trap now warped into a high-stakes snare for both sides. Collins adjusted quickly. We'll keep the pressure. Trap gets tighter. Ramirez, you and Henderson, you move to the north ridge with Alpha and feed visual to Overwatch. Don't get fancy. Ramirez's stomach dropped. The ridge they chose was thin and exposed, a place where a keen eye and a steady hand could change the world. She swallowed and followed orders. They crawled into position, every breath measured. The north ridge offered a view down into the sniper's likely firing lanes, but it also felt like a perch where a hawk might land to pick them off. Ramirez lay flat, feeling the hollow of rock press against her chest. The wind translated rock into a whispering threat. Minutes stretched like hours. Then she saw movement, subtle like a twitch of fabric. A man in the rocks taking a breath before a shot. Ramirez swallowed bile and keyed the radio. Target in sight, grid Alpha. Hold, Collins hissed back. Wait for confirmation. Another glint, then the flash of a muzzle. The trap tightened. Overwatch teams picked up their aim. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to a hairline of decision. Ramirez thought of Torres, of the blood that had dried on her hands. She felt the weight of intent press against her like a physical thing. Kill or be killed. Her finger steadied on the trigger. Then, before she could make the choice black and final, something happened that none of them had counted on. On the tablet, the drone operator shouted. Movement. Northwest. Too many. They're flanking. Multiple heat signatures moving fast. It was a ripple, then a surge. Figures streamed along a faint line, opening fire into the trap's edges. The sniper team had not been lone artists of patience. They were part of a network. They had a plan, and now that plan was moving into the next phase. Chaos detonated. Bullets spat from unexpected directions, and the carefully orchestrated kill zone dissolved into a scramble for survival. The mortars began to adjust their fire, shaking the ground under Ramirez with thunder. The drone zoomed as the valley turned into a chessboard gone mad. Collins barked orders like a conductor in the middle of a tornado. Fall back. Fall back to the secondary positions. Ramirez, Henderson, cover the rear. Ramirez moved on instinct, firing bursts to keep enemy heads down as their own men withdrew. Men she had fought beside started to fall, some with muted groans, others with a silence that was final. The radio screamed with fragmented commands. The UAV feed stuttered under a sudden burst of jamming. Someone was actively blinding their eyes. They made the secondary positions with a handful of men left intact. Ramirez's palms were raw from the grip on her rifle. Sweat and dust mixed into a mask over her face. Around her, the air smelled of spent powder and something deeper, the metallic tang of loss. Status? Captain Myers demanded when he reached them, his voice the same bark but now laced with urgency. Collins spat a report. We took casualties. Mortars still up but limited. UAV jammed. Snipers mobile, they broke the kill. We're pulling out on coordinates Bravo 3. We'll regroup and then we run a night sweep with recon pairs. No large movements during daylight until we fix the jamming. Ramirez exhaled, a ragged sound. Her eyes scanned the ridges anyway, as if he, the patient ghost with the perfect trigger finger, would appear like a punchline from a cruel joke. He did not. That night, under a different sky and with fewer brothers than they'd started the day with, Ramirez sat with her back to the wall of the outpost, forehead in her hands. Her mind replayed the day's choreography until each motion had the weight of inevitability. The UAV had given them a sighting. Mortars had thrown thunder at the ridge. The trap had been set, and yet the enemy had broken it unpredictably and savagely. The valley had taken its pound. Henderson dropped beside her, exhaustion drawing his mouth down at the corners. You okay? He asked. The question was tiny in the immense dark. No, she said honestly. But I'm alive. He nodded. That's something. She looked up at him. They beat the trap today. They adapted, he said. So will we. She wanted to believe him. The trap had failed, yes, but it had also done something else. It had shown them the sniper, if only for a blink. It had shown the shape of their opponent, methodical, organized, and with resources. That knowledge was a double-edged thing. It gave them a target and made the target more dangerous. Ramirez chewed at the inside of her cheek, thinking of Torres again. The anger in her had not cooled. It hadn't been meant to. It had hardened into something clear. She would get smarter. She would think in moves and countermoves. She would stop letting him make choices for her. She whispered into the night, more vow than whisper, "We'll pull him out. We'll make him exposed. He won't be able to hide forever." The valley kept its secrets for now. But somewhere up there, where rock met sky and patience bred killers, the sniper hunched and smoked, tasting the day's victory. He'd beat their trap, but the war was not yet finished. Ramirez felt the electric line of the story tightening. The next move would be bloodier, cleverer, and the price would be paid in decisions, not guesses. And she had already decided. Whatever it took, she would be the one to make that next decision. They called it a sweep, as if the valley were nothing more than dust on a floor to be brushed away. Ramirez knew better. The valley kept bones. It kept names. A sweep meant moving through the belly of something that wanted you dead, and the only thing you could do was walk slower than fear and let your eyes do the thinking. Captain Myers had decided on a different tack after the trap failed. Smaller, leaner teams working at night with local Afghan scouts and electronic countermeasures to try to cut off the sniper's mobility. No mortar barrages this time, no loud mechanical birds above to be jammed. It was surgical. It was dangerous. It was, Collins said quietly to Ramirez while they checked gear, our best chance to find where they sleep. Ramirez listened to the plan and felt something ease and tighten at once. Ease because the chance to hunt them on equal terms, no drones, no artillery, felt honest and clean. Tighten because it meant going where the enemy wanted them to think they wouldn't go. Close, personal, cramped between rock and breath. You sure about this? Henderson asked as they loaded night vision monocles and comms into their packs. He had the easy humor that never quite disappeared even if he was tired. You and me? You sure you want my jokes next to you in a tunnel? She grinned despite herself, small and quick. Keep the jokes, Henderson. I'll take the accuracy. He made a mock-hurt face. Rude. I was going to tell you the one about the 3 privates and a goat. Not now, Henderson. She clipped her helmet on and checked her M4 again. Save it for when we're old and complain about our knees. That was the thing about them. In the middle of war, humor was a defibrillator. It didn't revive anything that mattered, but it kept the heart beating. They moved out at dusk with 2 recon teams. Ramirez in one with Collins, Henderson, and 2 Afghan scouts led by a wiry local named Farid who knew the valley like a map printed on his hands. The other team skirted higher to provide an immediate reaction if things unraveled. Their orders were simple. Find the sniper's logistics nodes, the spotters, the caches, the little signs that betrayed a man who lived out of rocks, and either capture or neutralize them. No big fires. No long engagements. Be ghosts. The first hours were a study in small calculus. Moves were measured, voices a low knife of air. Night vision washed the world into sickly green. Shapes became simplified, shadows flat. The scouts led them through goat paths and collapsed terraces, stopping at places where dirt had been disturbed in ways that didn't match wind or animal. Small things, fresh cigarette butts, scuff marks on a boulder, discarded wrappers, were intelligence. Pieces of the sniper's life that didn't belong to nature. Here, Farid whispered, dropping to his knees to brush the soil with a fingertip. He looked up, eyes bright in the visor's glow. Tracks. 2 men. Heavy pack. Went that way. He pointed a thin hand toward a narrow gully that led up to a ruined bunker. It coughed black at the top like a mouth. Ramirez's pulse went up. A bunker. Old Soviet concrete, half swallowed by dust and lichen. Perfect for a sniper wanting a high, protected nest and for the enemies who supported him to stash ammo and water below. It also meant risk. Concrete held sound and concealed angles. It meant a choke point. It meant a decision. Collins crouched low and scanned. This could be the node. We'll go up in pairs. Ramirez, you and Henderson take the left flank entrance. I'll take the right with Farid. Move slow. Clear rooms. If you find civilians, detain, question, move. His voice was calm but every word carried the weight of the consequence it could unleash. Ramirez nodded. Copy. Her mouth tasted like metal. They ascended one by one, then in tight twos, boots whispering against rock. The gully funneled them until the bunker entrance breathed its cold, stale air. The smell was a mix of damp concrete and old diesel. Henderson gave a tiny hand signal, 3 fingers flicked, and Ramirez returned it. Ready. On her mark. She pushed the door a fraction and peered inside. Flash of moonlight on metal, a pile of rucks, a tangle of fabric that might be a bed or a trap. She eased in and swept the M4 at shoulder level, muzzle low to avoid clipping the ceiling. Henderson followed, eyes wide behind his NVGS but steady. Clear, he mouthed. Ramirez moved forward, the concrete floor crunching with salt and grit. An old Soviet cot leaned against a wall, a small stove in the corner, a string of prayer beads veiled in dust. The place felt lived in, like a cave someone had moved into. And there, against the far wall, a shadow moved, not fast, not like a rat, just a human turn of shoulder. She froze. The weight of the moment settled so heavily it hurt. A man stood, hands raised. Not a fighter, too thin, scratched, ragged beard. The face of someone who'd been pulled into this war rather than born of it. Farid's whisper threaded through the earpiece. Civilian? Perhaps worker or spotter. She kept her rifle steady. Hands up. Now. Her voice was a blade. It cut. The man complied, eyes huge, lips moving in a prayer she couldn't understand. They searched the bunker fast but considerate, checking the small rooms, finding little caches of supplies. Bottles of water, a couple of AK magazines wrapped in oilcloth, a radio set with a dead battery. Nothing that screamed sniper, not yet. But the next crawlspace they opened was the one that made the air go thinner. A smuggler's door beneath a tarp, a ladder down into shadow. Collins signaled. Henderson, you down. Ramirez on the ladder second. Keep your light off. We clear with hands and feel. The ladder was old and groaned. Ramirez's palms were slick. She climbed with the rifle held tight, body pressed against the metal. The temperature changed as they descended. Air grew cooler, drier, like a mouth closing. The tunnel smelled faintly of oil and old boots. At the bottom, the space opened into a culvert. Not wide, but long, carved into the earth with concrete arches that echoed every whisper. Boxes sat stacked against a wall, medical supplies, food, cigarette packets. And there, arranged like a small shrine of war, were dozens of op-amps, batteries, firearm parts, and a neatly folded ghillie sack. A scope lay on a crate, lenses black and patient. Henderson crouched and picked up the scope with gloved hands, breath barely audible. Check this out. High-grade glass. Custom mounts. Not local scrap. He looked at Ramirez, eyes sharp. This is sniper gear. Ramirez swallowed. Her hands tightened on the rifle. So the nest was a decoy? Farid spoke softly into his radio, words staccato in Pashto. Collins understood enough to frown. They've got resupply tunnels. There's a network. We're hitting a distribution node. This is bigger than one man. That was a hard pill. Bigger meant more people who could die, more logistics that had to be broken, and more chance that their little mission would bloom into something costly. Every decision now carried a multiplication factor. Every raid branched consequences. Collins made the call. We can't take the entire network tonight. We gather intel, take what we can carry, and collapse this node if possible. Grab any radios, any paperwork, and leave charges to block the tunnel. We'll deny their movement. Ramirez's stomach twisted. If we blow the tunnel and there are non-combatants. We'll clear first, Collins said gently. We'll detain who we can. We'll take pictures. We'll do it by the book. They worked methodically. Henderson bagged the scope and wrapped it with a uniform like a relic. Farid collected the small radios and maps. Ramirez found a notebook wrapped in oilcloth, handwriting in Dari and some numbers. She tucked it into her vest like a talisman. When they reached the shaft to climb back, a noise stopped them, the tensing of a body, a soft sign that someone else was coming. Footsteps above. Not foreign, not the clumsy stamp of a group, one person. Light flicked faint against a wall. They had been seen. Collins hissed a command that chilled Ramirez more than bullets ever had. Do not fire until I say. We're taking one alive if we can. If you kill him, you lose the dock. It felt like a betrayal to the blood that had soaked the valley earlier, to let the enemy breathe. But Collins was a man who weighed the next move like a ledger. He knew the value of a captured mind over a dead body. An alive captive could be questioned. A body was just a tally. They set up silently, anticipation making everything bright-edged. Then a man came down through the hatch, a boyish face under a hood, the shadow of stubble, eyes that flashed like broken glass when he saw the barrel of a rifle pointed at him. He froze, hands raised. English? Collins asked. He nodded finally. A little. Who are you? Farid demanded, Pashto skimming across the concrete. The boy's voice shook. Local. Work here. Carry water. not fighter. He was thin, frightened, the kind of person who existed in the margins. Collins signaled Ramirez. She stepped forward and took the boy's left wrist, feeling the light pulse there. Up close, his breath smelled of tobacco and stale tea. She searched him quickly. No weapons, no detonators. A folded scrap of paper stuck from his pocket. She slid it out with a gloved hand and unfolded it. Numbers, coordinates, some notes in a hand that was neat and practiced. "You said you carry water?" Ramirez asked in a quiet voice. The boy nodded, tears welling. "You ever see men with scopes above?" He hesitated, then the words tumbled out in broken English. "Sometimes. Old man, he comes. He brings glass. He sits. He takes shots. He pays. We carry. We eat." The last line hit Ramirez in the throat like a fist. Men came for money, local boys carried gear. It was an old story in new clothes. The enemy's cruelty was less an ideology than a ledger and better supplied than she'd imagined. Collins looked at Ramirez. "We detain him, get the laptop. See if we can find out where they move."